Greetings, fellow Earthlings. My name is Zach,
And I'm Jessica.
and this is
High Level Hairesy.
Question everything. Without the question, how can you have the answer? Wisdom comes from within. This is High Level Hairesy.
Today we're going somewhere deep. Why do some children describe lives they supposedly never lived? Why did Plato and Pythagoras both teach that the soul survives and returns? Why do spiritual traditions across the world keep circling the same idea, that life may be bigger than one body in one lifetime? And why did parts of early Christianity wrestle with ideas about the soul that later became off limits?
This episode is not about blind belief. It's about following the thread through philosophy, religion, strange case studies, and modern research. Join us as we ask the question, have you lived before? Reincarnation, ancient memory, and the science of past lives. But before we get into all the juiciness, let's take a breath together to get on the same wavelength, drop into the moment. And for those who have ears, let them hear. So I'll count you off. Inhale will be your 1. And we'll count through 4, hold for 2 at the top, and then exhale for 4. If you're somewhere that you can audibly sigh it out, do that because it just resets everything, speaks to the body, and it feels really great. So here we go. Inhale, 2, 3, 4. Hold, 2. Exhale, 2, 3, 4. Beautiful. All right. So most people hear reincarnation and immediately sort it into one of 2 boxes, either sacred truth or total nonsense. But what gets interesting is when you realize this idea didn't just come from one religion or New Age corner of the internet. It shows up in Greek philosophy, in certain currents around early Christianity, and in modern case investigations involving children, and in stories that are so specific, they at least make you stop and raise an eyebrow. And remember, we watched that Netflix documentary, which we'll go over some of the case studies of the kids that have past life memories a little later.
Mm-hmm.
And this isn't about forcing a belief. It's about asking what kind of evidence would even count here. Memory, philosophy, spiritual testimony, patterns, corroborated cases. And if consciousness is more than the brain, what would change about how we see life, death, trauma, karma, and purpose? And actually, at the time of Jesus, reincarnation was an accepted part of Hebrew theology and was included in the Christian canon for the first 5 centuries of its existence. That's 500 years that was included. And that's one of my favorite parts that we're going to get into a little later as well, of like, why would that be removed? And if it was the first 500 years of Christianity, seems like that might have been kind of an important part.
A big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then prior to Christianity, we have, the philosophers. So not talking about religion, going back before Christ. What do they say now? CE?
Common Era.
Common Era
CE.
instead of
AD.
BC. Oh, no, before. Sorry. BC is before Christ.
Right.
Do we still say BC?
I think it's
BC and CE instead of AD.
Yeah.
Okay. Just to clarify that. So, BC is before Christ.
I don't know when that changed. It
And instead of AD, after death.
Because all of our school books, they all said AD.
Mm-hmm.
So it had to have been within the past 10 to 20 years that they just started doing CE. I don't know.
I don't know. But anyway, you can think of reincarnation almost like a system, not as like mystical fairy dust, but as a structure. The soul comes in, learns, forgets, repeats, and hopefully evolves. So instead of you messed up, now suffer, it becomes more like you didn't finish the lesson, so here comes another round. And
it's like a teacher it's like a nice teacher that allows you to retake the test.
and I'm excited to get into like also, why we do forget. What, is the purpose? Is that manipulative or merciful? And, what would we grow the same if we remembered everything?
Right.
I mean, and there's some things I have in my own life that I feel like I might have gone through it in a past life. Like, okay, I'm just going to say it. I have always been terrified of like hardcore drugs, and cocaine is one that is always like, I was like, no, I will never. No, I'm just not going to touch anything like that. And I have this almost sense of knowing that I might have OD'd on cocaine in a past life.
Possibly.
Yeah. Like it's there, I said it. But, so reincarnation, because we both grew up in an evangelical church setting where if you even brought up that word, you like
it's
get
heresy.
out. Yeah. Heresy. And so I did not believe in that for a long time. And then when I started opening up to my spirituality, to my spirit versus my religion, I read some books that my dad had given me, Obi-Tom Kenobi. And actually Conversations with God was huge because they touch on that. Neil Donald Walsh touches on that. But Jonathan Livingston Seagull by Richard Bach was what really, like when it clicked, when I felt the visceral truth knowledge bomb in my body, that this makes so much more sense than
YOLO.
You only live once and you better get it right, y'all, or you either go to the good place or the bad place. And you have free will, but if you don't make the right choice, you're going to go to the bad place. But you have free will. But you're choosing. So when I read this, it's not, if you're basing your whole morality and your whole relationship with the one infinite creator on, am I going to go to the good place or the bad place? Then, does it feel
that
sincere?
Moral?
Yeah.
If that's what your morality is based on,
is there a connection there, or is it fear-based? And so reincarnation, the idea of the soul continuing, the soul is eternal. And there's a book that I've read recently. I have to go grab it, but talking about near-death experiences and what people experience when they're clinically dead. And a lot of them experience some of the same things, like a life review, and going, back through essentially. I envision it as like a panorama, like you see everything all at once, but in the other realm, it's not the same. Our brains they're not limited in that same capacity. And you see the ways you affected people and you feel it. And it's not a sense of judgment. It's a sense of, okay, here's where you can learn. And so the purpose of reincarnation and coming back isn't necessarily punishment
or karma. It's karma, but it's not in a bad way of like.
Karma is the sense of, and even Jesus said this, like what you dish out, you're going to get back. What you sow,
it's like the law
you
of,
reap.
Reciprocity.
Yes. And so, what you are putting out is what you're going to get back. That also is the law of attraction. What you think about, you bring about. How you treat someone, I wouldn't go around smashing random bugs. All I'm saying, like,
But it's not, reincarnation is not necessarily, and this is over time, you learn more and more about everything that you look into, like reincarnation. And for a lot of people, they view it as, or that people that do believe in it as more of a punishment, like a negative thing. Like, oh, you're stuck in the cycle of reincarnation, and like
until you get it right.
until you're perfect.
And it's more a sense of like your soul evolving to the point that it becomes complete and one. And then you join. I'll read some scripture later from some of the removed gospels, the hidden gospels that are not in the canonical gospels that talk about that. But, speaking of people that believed in reincarnation, and not necessarily as a karmic punishment loop, but as soul evolution, before reincarnation was woo-woo or new age, because that came way later. And, I want to do an episode on new age, like specifically what that means. I had a client once say to me, isn't that kind of new age? Talking about my crystals. And I'm like, well, I think crystals are made, they're part of creation. They're part of the earth. They're beautiful. They do have scientific physical properties and energies they emit, just like all of us. But I mean, I guess if you want to call that new age.
It's just another term for Eastern traditions.
Mm-hmm.
That's really all it is.
I know, but I want to dig into it.
I know. I'm saying that's like today's way of just saying, you could just say Eastern traditions. I feel like it gets kind of.
And there was a woman that brought it to the West, and then it got labeled new age.
Are we talking about Helena
This
Blavatsky
is the
or
of the age
Alice
of
Bailey?
Yes. I don't remember. I think the first one. Do you know how many names are floating in my head? Let's get back on reincarnation, so tell us a little bit about some of the philosophical roots of reincarnation.
Because it's more than just a spiritual trend.
Indeed.
So let's go way back.
But, every major religion, before we do go into that, every major religion, especially the Eastern, which are thousands of years older than
Christianity is the youngest out of all of the big religions.
But Hinduism, Buddhism, Sikhism, the Native Americans, certain early streams of Judaism, the early Christians, as we mentioned earlier, all subscribed to the philosophy of reincarnation. And Pythagoras.
Yeah. So let's go back to some of the minds like Plato and Pythagoras. So these two giants of ancient Greek thought were already talking about the soul surviving death and returning. Even though a lot of people act like it's, like you said, fringe, new age invention, it's not.
When was Pythagoras?
When was he around?
Yeah.
He was around, he was born in 570 BC, and he died in 495 BC. So he was around almost 600 years before Jesus.
Okay.
So the Stanford Encyclopedia says that he was famous for teaching that the soul is immortal and goes through reincarnations. Pythagoreanism also taught what's called metempsychosis. Metempsychosis is the transmigration of the soul after death into a new body, human or animal. So Pythagoras was a true believer in reincarnation. Plato also, who came after Pythagoras, he was not a student of Pythagoras. He was around a little bit after him, but Plato, his philosophy included the soul existing before birth and surviving death. In his work, The Myth of souls undergo judgment, choose lives, and then forget before returning. This fits the larger Greek idea that forgetting is built into embodiment. And side note, before I keep going on with those guys, some other famous reincarnationists were Benjamin Franklin, Socrates. Socrates was who Plato studied under. Socrates hinted at soul continuity. Benjamin Franklin, in one of his speeches, said, "I shall exist in some shape or other." Leonardo da Vinci believed learning spans lifetimes. And Carl Jung, also the famous psychologist, spoke about archetypes and collective unconscious, which echoes past life themes. So Pythagoras actually purportedly remembered 8 of his past lives and taught his students how to remember as well.
Well, go ahead.
Plato said we experience what psychology calls an event boundary. That's when the mind puts things into little packets for processing. And when you get out of that packet, you may not have access to that information. So a good example is like you're in the living room and you think of something you want to go get in the kitchen. So what happens, like, as soon as you go through the doorway in the kitchen, happens to me all the time, you forget what you came into there for. So that right there is an event boundary. And Plato articulated how that is involved in the reincarnation experience. Plato famously said, "Our soul existed before our birth." He also said, to go more in depth about reincarnation, he said the choice of souls was in most cases based on their own experience of a previous life. Knowledge easily acquired is that which the enduring self had in an earlier life, so that it flows back easily. So he's saying that if like you're really naturally good at something, most likely, or you're naturally good at something, you learn it quickly. Most likely that is something from a previous lifetime that you've already learned or that you were already good at.
Like I gave the example we were talking yesterday about like some 4-year-old is like badass at the guitar.
Yeah.
And it's like they might have been Stevie Ray Vaughan in another life.
I've thought that there's a few kids, young guys today or within the past 5 to 10 years that I've thought, I'm like, man, there's this kid. I saw a little clip of some kid from, I want to say either Vietnam or maybe South Korea or something over there in that area. And he was playing a guitar. I mean, he had to have been like 8 or something like that. Dude, the stuff he was playing blues. And not only just the technical proficiency of this kid, but the feeling behind it. Because blues is not about technical proficiency. The blues is about feeling. Mm-hmm. And he had the technical proficiency, but the feeling, because man, when you hear like a good blues artist, a good blues guitar player, you feel it, they're speaking through that guitar. So that's why it's all about feeling. And this kid, normally blues takes a while for you to really get good at because you kind of should live a little bit of life. Life needs to beat you down a little bit for you to this kid is only like 7 or 8 years old and you're like, where did this kid get? That is not coming from this lifetime. Whatever he is putting out, that came from somewhere else, from past experience. So I think that's just a good example of what Plato was saying there about, knowledge easily acquired is that which the enduring self had in an earlier life. So Pythagoras, as far as some things that he said regarding it, now keep in mind, Pythagoras, there are no authenticated writings by him that have survived. People use Pythagoras all the time. He was a real person. It's not that he wasn't real or anything. He's obviously, you've got the Pythagorean theorem and everything in mathematics. A lot of people call him the triangle guy. But there are actually no authenticated writings by him that have survived. So the best we have are later ancient reports about what he taught from like his students and people after him. I believe a lot of his stuff was either destroyed and or taken by, like when Alexandria was destroyed, the Library of Alexandria was destroyed. the Catholic Church, the Vatican I believe they actually do have some of his stuff.
Most
I'm
certainly.
sure. I mean, because the
I would
Library of
almost bet on
Alexandria
it.
was like one of the most important centers of learning and education and knowledge in the world at that time. So you would have to think Pythagoras, his stuff had to have been in there. So I guarantee you it was either destroyed or they took it. Anyways, so remember, there's no authenticated writings by him, but two of the clearest lines tied to his teaching on reincarnation are: one, he said he held that the soul is immortal, that by transmigration it puts on many bodies. And then this famous anecdote, reported as evidence of his belief in transmigration: Pythagoras saw a puppy being beaten. He said to stop because he recognized in its cry the soul of a friend.
See, my thing though, I've read before that once you like basically evolve to a certain point, like a human soul, that you would not go backwards to a different kind of being. Like you're not going to be a human soul or a human avatar and then you were bad, so now you're going to be a snake crawling on the ground.
Well, I guess there's two schools of thought when it comes to reincarnation. Some people don't believe.
Because the whole point is to continue to evolve.
Don't Hindus believe that? Don't they believe transmigration? Is it the Hindus that believe that? I might be wrong, but I mean, transmigration is the idea that you can go from one to the other, that you can jump from being a human back to. I think I kind of agree with you. I don't necessarily think that.
From the channel books that I've read, where it's like other entities being channeled and they talk about, the evolution of the soul, I just, my personal belief is that you're not going to go from.
Yeah, I'm going to go backwards. Because
and if you even start as, I kind of, my thought is, do you go through like being an animal? And then because we, read about
the law of one, you have
second dimensional beings,
1D or
yeah,
first density
and
beings, which is
2D.
like plant life, rocks, plants, things like
and then as
inanimate.
your consciousness evolves and your soul evolves. But then my other thought is like, you plant beings are plant beings and human beings are human beings, and this as the soul. But again, we're just we won't really know.
Yeah, I mean, none of us are really going to know until you know. Like, it's interesting to think about either way. I think it makes more sense that you wouldn't devolve, because like I said, that you've got first density beings, second density beings, third density beings, fourth density. We are third density beings, or 3D. Humans are third density. First density is plant life, rocks, inanimate type objects like that. Whereas second density is like your animals and your fish and those types of beings that are somewhat, more conscious than plant life or things like that. And then your third density would be us. And then it goes on from there. And then what was Jesus supposed to be? Was he
like 70?
Was he? Yeah. Okay. So he was just like way ahead of us. And technically he came back as a human, but he had to be one of us. He couldn't just show up glowing like a Greek god, he had to be one of us.
Jesus was self-realized. He understood the divine spark. And that is the biggest thing I think with reincarnation, and is that every person has a divine spark essentially imprisoned inside of him or her. And the man's destiny is to liberate the divine spark and unite with the larger unity of creation and creator. So we each have a divine spark that we are conditioned and dumbed down to forget about that. And, when Jesus remembered and knew that he carried that divine spark and could manipulate the physical realm. And I think that that's the evolution of that, and it becoming, like Neil Donald Walsh says, the main goal is to remember who you really are. And that's not, you as the identity that you've taken on and the personality that you've taken on in this lifetime.
That's your ego.
Yeah. And
your id.
It's the fully balanced masculine and feminine energies of yourself, the full integration of all that you are, and acceptance, and the yin and the yang of it. And once you have kind of fully realized that, and you're able to move about and you understand your true authentic power, then you kind of rejoin, you unify with Creator.
Remember,
and then you can, I've heard it said, kind of, if you come back as guide or if you come back to this lifetime, maybe you come as a teacher, or to teach some of these things that you quickly, because we do have the forgetting part. And because the forgetting part is, if you were conscious of all of your other lifetimes, and there are certain people like Matthias
that tap into that have that gift,
that have the gift of remembering, so that they can bring it forward and teach. But it doesn't, they went through a time where it kind of did affect them, but then they grew from it. But if we remembered our past traumas, if we remembered, which you can carry past life trauma into this life, which can then
genetic memory
lead to things like, addictions or fears, or, things like, things that you have an irrational fear of something, but maybe you have an irrational fear of water because you drowned in another lifetime, something like that. But okay, I feel like I went off on a tangent, but get me back.
Would you even grow the same way if you did remember everything? That's
right.
like the, you're playing a game or something like that, and if you have all the cheat codes, like, it's not going to be the same experience, because you're not learning things, you're not having to figure out things.
And this life, this avatar that you're in now, it is like a game, a video game, and you beat the first level, and that was like, that was kind of difficult, but you got through it pretty quickly. And then, just keep going up through level 10, up, down, left, right, BA, select, start. You got some cheat codes because that's from Contra, if you don't remember.
That's a throwback.
But if you get, maybe you pass like the first 5 levels of life or / challenges very quickly because you've already been through that. But now you're on to a new challenge that requires some massive soul evolution, and you're learning about you. And that's why we don't judge any experience as negative or positive, because you don't actually know. It can look very negative, but then in the end, it brought you somewhere that you learned, or you met someone, or, all that jazz.
I think you were starting to say earlier that it would be
self-realized. I was talking about Jesus being
right, but it would also be traumatic if you remembered all of your past lives,
all of your past
the ways
lives.
that
you wouldn't
died.
Be focused if you thought about, I remember my spouse from my previous life. Where are my kids from my previous life? It would be painful.
It'd be painful to remember that, because you would naturally miss them. You would miss your spouse or your kids or family or friends or whoever.
We've got some stories like that.
Or you would pine for the life that you did have. Maybe you had a really good life. Maybe you were some powerful, famous, rich, whatever. successful person, but maybe in this life you're not. And so then you'd be pining for that life. But then also the traumatic experience of like PTSD is basically what you would have, because if you remembered all the ways you died, I'm
Which
sure
some people have unconsciously.
right. And then
I
that's
actually went through a past life regression, which I'll talk about later. But
and then that's where it came, where you started to talk about it. And I think we will bring this up later about some people have certain phobias, fears, and things like that stemming from maybe the way that you died in your last life or a past life in general. So
yeah, and if you remembered things, you would not be as focused on this life.
and you're just not going to learn what you need to learn.
Yeah.
If you knew it all already, what's the point of learning if you knew all of that? So, it's interesting that these philosophers tied morality to repeated lives. So I think they kind of got into the whole YOLO mindset not mindset, but the conversation of like, do you really live once? I don't know. But
I mean, it just seems like it's a waste of a soul.
And it also seems like with
time.
everything that happens in life and what you learn and how long it takes, one lifetime is not enough. Even if humans still did live to 120, 150 or older, that's still or even, what was this? Methuselah, 987 or 967 years old or whatever in the Bible. Even that is a blip in the grand scheme of things. But then you look at your average lifespan now of what, 75 to 85 in that range, and I'm sure that'll go up, but even that, especially, that's not even a whole century. That's a blip, man. That is not enough time to learn everything that you need to learn for all time. It makes more sense that you would come back over and over again. And it's just kind of on you as to how quickly you get to that point. So, the body is obviously a temporary condition. Also, the point I wanted to bring up earlier too is that if you truly believe, well, this isn't a belief, I think this is a fact, that energy can neither be created nor destroyed. So energy, it just transmutes. It goes from one thing to the other. It doesn't ever just disappear. So that would make sense that your soul, your spirit is energy. It's that spark. Well, that spark's not just going to go out. Your body, the vessel, the avatar that you are in, that's what went out. But the energy inside of you, that doesn't get destroyed. That lines up with physics, with modern physics. And modern physics, they know that there is something, because they've weighed people when they die. There's been scientists that are like, man, I wonder if the soul really exists. And what they did was they weighed a person right before they died, and then they weighed them right after they died. And I cannot remember the exact, it's not a whole lot. It's only like maybe an ounce or something like that. It's a real small amount of weight, but it was enough weight that was noticeable that we're like, there's no other reason why this body would, right after death, weigh slightly less. And they believe that that's the soul, like leaving the body, and the soul, that energy weighs a certain amount. So just interesting. So that's, interesting that the triangle guy from school was apparently also talking about reincarnation. So it's like this ties in with mathematics. It's weird, but we live in a mathematic universe. So before reincarnation was Instagram spirituality, it was philosophy. But what happens when you bring in mysticism and the idea that the soul is here to remember something? All right, so let's get into Dorothy Eady.
And some of the people that actually remembered some of their past lives. So Dorothy Eady, she is an adult case, but it started as a child. And she was a real British-born woman who later lived in Egypt. And she worked in Egyptian antiquities and became widely known as Seti, which is an Egyptian name. She believed she had lived a previous life in ancient Egypt as a priestess, and she accounts many stories and includes claims that she recognized features of Abydos, which is an Egyptian city, and identified the location of a temple garden that had not been in existence for quite some time. And so as a child, Dorothy had an accident. She hit her head. The doctor said there wasn't anything he can do. Then she ended up passing. They declared her clinically dead. And when they came back to the room, they had left the room. When they came back, she was playing just like normal. But when
And had no signs of anything having happened.
Of an accident. She started saying she wanted to go home. She wanted to go home. I want to go home. And her mom was like, you are home. And she's like, no, I want to go to my real home. And she she kept saying that. They ended up going to a museum one day.
British Museum.
And there was an Egyptian, the word's escaping me. Egyptian exhibit. Egyptian exhibit that had a lot of artifacts and some mummies. And she kind of flipped out. She ran to them. She began kissing the feet. She began, she got excited. And
she told everybody that she got mad at everybody around because they were wearing shoes in there.
She said, take off your shoes. And they started going back to the museum whenever they could so she could spend time there. And then her parents, they started buying her books on Egyptology, and she was recognizing, she picked up hieroglyphics extremely well. And then there were at a point, she would wake up in the night and she had no recollection of it the next day, but she would write in hieroglyphs and eventually ended up, it was translated into information that
she had ended up writing something that was 60 or 70 pages worth of hieroglyphics. And it ended up being, after being translated, it was basically the story of her, back then.
So, excuse me. She was the first in 1935. She took a job with Egypt's Department of Antiquities, and she was the first woman ever hired. But she quickly made a name for herself as a respected scholar because she just knew so much that they had said it was uncanny how much information she knew and what she was able to translate. And she had no formal training. She became known as an expert in the field. And finally, in 1952, Dorothy was able to take a job in Abydos, the town where she believed she lived. She actually had gone there prior and said, this is my real home. She recognized it. Yes. And she observed ancient Egyptian religion. She walked barefoot everywhere, and she would spend her nights praying and sleeping in the temples, specifically the Temple of Seti, because she believed, she said she was a priestess at that temple and had specific memories of being in that temple. And then there was somebody who wanted to test Dorothy, and I believe it was 1957, and he was the new chief of antiquities, and he said, that she did have an uncanny understanding, but he wasn't really sure that she lived in the Temple of Seti thousands of years ago. So one night he escorted her to the temple, and the only light they had was a torch. And he asked her to take him to different parts of the temple. And she, at this point in time, nothing had been published about the layout of the temple. Dorothy had never been in there. And Dorothy was able to guide him anywhere he asked to go with no map, no light. She knew every inch of the temple. And after his sixth attempt to stump her, he gave up. One of her recurring dreams was of the gardens of the Temple of Seti, but those hadn't been discovered by archaeologists yet. And Dorothy told scientists where to find the gardens. So they ended up excavating, and guess what? They found it. She said if they dug on the north side of the temple in a specific spot, they would find a hidden tunnel. Sure enough, the tunnel was there. And in 1964, she turned 60 years old. And by Egyptian law, she was supposed to retire. But she was not only the first woman hired by the Department of Antiquities, she was also given special permission to keep working because she was too valuable of a resource to let go. And though like her specialty was the Temple of Seti, she did claim to have knowledge of other ancient Egyptian sites. And when I say Egyptian, it just my mouth gets lazy. She said the lost tomb of Nefertiti was underneath the tomb of her stepson, Tutankhamun.
King Tut.
And she made this claim in 1972. King Tut's tomb was found in 1922. Though the tomb had been studied for 50 years, there was no evidence of a chamber there. In 2015, radar imaging technologies showed that there actually was a chamber right where she said it would be. So, is this reincarnation, intuition?
I mean, that started.
Psychic access.
That started when she was a kid.
And she was a child.
So there's just so many. It's harder to prove, and we'll show the difference later. It's harder to try and prove these things with adults because there's so many factors that could go along with an adult. I mean, you got to think she was obsessed with this stuff. So by the time she was an adult, it's very possible she knew just a lot of stuff. But like that dude taking her into the, there's no way it hadn't
knew
been
every inch of the temple.
She'd never been there inside before that point. And there wasn't any maps nothing like that had been, so she couldn't study it, and somehow she knew that place. So that it's experiential evidence that it's things like that. And there's similar stories with some of the kids that we'll talk about, but it's just crazy. But like I said, it's hard with the adult cases because they can become weaker.
But
because
like
adults can research.
I find it interesting that this happened after she was clinically dead and then came back almost like did something because of her going to the other side. It triggered something or opened her up to something to remember these lives, or I don't know, did another soul step in that,
that wasn't her.
Either case, it's somebody that was still, that was
from then
and remember in this lifetime. So there's, let's talk about some of we had once watched a documentary, and this was actually on Netflix, which was shocking, but I believe it was actually just called Reincarnation. And I don't think it's on there anymore. I tried to find it, but there were some specific stories about these kids.
Right. So the adult stories can always be challenged, but the cases that really make people stop are often the children. So the University of Virginia's Division of Perceptual Studies is often what's cited as far as the scholastic world studying this. They said that it has studied children who report previous life memories for decades. The children are usually between about ages 2 and 5. They often describe a recent ordinary life and may also show unusual phobias, play patterns, or preferences that don't fit their current family context. The University of Virginia researchers, including Ian Stevenson and Jim Tucker, have documented thousands of these cases. So this is where the conversation changes a little bit, not because science has proven reincarnation, because it hasn't technically been proven, but because there's a long-running body of research on very young children saying oddly specific things, sometimes with details that investigators later say can be checked. So a lot of these are situations, we're only going to talk about a few of them, but these are the bigger ones where these kids, there's no refuting how they could know some of the things that they know. And that's where your experiential proof to me, okay, yeah, it's not a scientist in a lab,
Right.
proving but like, how else there's no other way to prove this.
To me, if you say, I have this memory and you're like 3, and then people can go actually corroborate the story and the details match. Like a 3-year-old's not reading, a 3-year-old's not absorbing like
any of that
stuff. So
right.
Let's talk about a couple of those cases.
So some of the patterns that they're looking for here, some patterns that we find in these cases are, most of them are very young ages. They have repeated statements, and a lot of times they're repeated the same over long periods of time. So their story doesn't change. There's a strong emotional charge with all of these kids. And then a lot of them have phobias linked to what they claim are their past life deaths. So, as well as details that later fade as the child grows older. They've noticed that a lot of these children, typically it's, ages, after about age 5 or 6 is when they start kind of fading, these memories start to kind of fade. They've also talked about, there's been these same children that have certain like birthmarks that then match up with whoever it is they say they were in a past life with how they died. So maybe they got stabbed, in the stomach or something, and they've got like a birthmark on the spot where they got stabbed, or they got shot or something, and there's a birthmark. A really good movie that has that whole thing in it, Cloud Atlas.
Oh yeah.
That's a very really cool movie, but it's about reincarnation is really what it is. And there's characters in there that have birthmarks that coincide with what their past life, the way they died.
Speaking of young kids, one time, you remember when Cash was 4 years old,
mm-hmm.
He used to say some very profound things as a tot. He still does. He's an old soul, but I said, Cashy, did you know that we've been a man and a woman before in our past lives? And he said, yeah, Jesus helps us decide what we're going to be when we come back. And I was like, oh, okay. Like that, made sense to me. And he was 4. I had never really talked about any of that before with him. And also, just another little quick Cashyism. He said to me, once I opened the door to some spiritual things, he said, did you know, he said, my angels told me that even if you're blind in your 2 eyes, you're never really blind because you're not blind in your 3rd eye.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. And he was 4 or 5 at that time as well.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, okay. So the children's that remember.
Right. So these are all just, again, none of these say that this is case closed, because science, the only way to really prove it is if you were able to die and come back and you could have some sort of way of proving that this happens. But all of these things are strange enough that serious people have been studying it for decades.
Yeah, like doctors.
This guy, Ian Stevenson, at the University of Virginia.
All right, let's talk about...
go ahead.
I was going to say, let's talk about James.
Right.
Leninger.
So this is the most famous American child case. The University of Virginia highlighted that James Leninger, as a child who began having intense nightmares and later described being a World War II pilot whose plane crashed after taking off from the USS Natoma Bay. Jim Tucker published on the case, and the reported details were later linked to pilot James Houston Jr. So a little boy started having nightmares about a fiery plane crash. He talked about being trapped in the cockpit. He started using names and specific details related to World War II aviation. Then investigators and family members say some of those details lined up with a real pilot, a real aircraft carrier, and a real death. So this is a child that is speaking about things. There's no way this child would know some of these specifics about the plane, about how this dude died. Because this kid, James Houston, was not a famous pilot. So it's not like this stuff was in the news or in an encyclopedia or in the library or something. That he was just a pilot. So there's no way this kid would know any of those details.
Yeah, like what are the odds that a toddler is producing, like the names? Like, okay, maybe they could have been really into planes and they knew some stuff about World War II planes, although we're talking about, what? Wasn't he like 2?
Yeah, he was very
2
young.
years old, I'm pretty positive.
He was very young, so earlier than you would be. You don't have interest in World War II planes when you're 2. You know what I mean?
And if you do, it's probably because you had a tie to them in a past life.
Right. So I don't think that kind of takes out the question of, can parents unintentionally shape the narrative over time? There isn't enough time to shape a narrative at that point.
And then, like I just said, like the names of people that he flew with.
Yep. The names of people, the aircraft carrier he was on, the way he died, all of those things.
And then didn't he crash into the ocean?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, then they were able to go back and verify all of these details
with investigators and family members of James Houston that were like, yep, this kid is describing how our James died and all these things. So,
and I mean, it's interesting, his name was James.
Same first name.
Yeah,
I thought that same thing too. It's just
That's
yet another interesting
coinky dink.
So, as we've already said, this isn't settling the debate, but it is saying that this makes the debate very inconvenient, because there's just too many things that prove or that point to what we're talking about. It's too many things to be coincidences. So the next one, let's talk about, there's an older case from India that kind of became one of the bigger cases as well.
Yeah, Shanti Devi. And the University of Virginia says that in her case, numerous statements she made matched verified facts about the deceased woman she claimed to have been. And the case became famous because of the number of details investigators said could be checked. So as a little girl, she began talking about another life. She talked about her husband, another home, another city. And it wasn't just the claim and all the specifics, but it was because investigators were able to match the real facts connected to the deceased woman. And she was, how old was she when she first began?
She was, hold on. I
don't remember how old she was.
I want to
so
say
I'd like to
she
get
was.
that.
I want to say she was 8, but let me double check.
And like, I mean, no matter like how many 8-year-olds or 4-year-olds or 6-year-olds are running around saying, "Oh, I had this husband and I had this," and then you're able to verify all that.
Right.
You know, did she go and look up some woman and find out all of her details to, you know?
She was 6.
Okay. So 6 years old, and she's spitting out these facts of her previous lifetime and remembering them. And then, you know, she wants to, that some of the other, there was a girl on the Netflix.
Or I'm sorry, she was 4 when she first started talking about it. She was 6 when she ran away from home to go to the place where she remembered.
Okay.
But she was 4 when she first started noticing, or her parents started noticing her talking about these things.
And see, if you look at these, okay, another reason why we don't remember, or not another reason, but this just shows you, like, it puts these children in a spot where they're not comfortable where they are because they're remembering something from another lifetime. Like Dorothy, she said, "I want to go home." She's home with her parents. And she's like, no. And she's depressed because she wants to go home. This little girl, 6 years old, Shanti, she runs away from home to go to what she knows as home. And so if we were to remember all of that, you know, it might make things a little difficult to hone in on. And there was another case, 2 cases that I remember from the documentary, there was a little boy who was like 3 years old, and he kept saying that he wanted his mom. And his mom, real mom or mom in this life, she was like, I am your mom. And he just was like, no, he wants to see his mom. And he started giving all these details. He started talking about this park. He started talking, about all these things. They were able to go. They found the woman that he said was his mother. And she let them know that indeed her son had died as a toddler.
Mm-hmm.
And then another instance was this little girl who she believed that, or she said she had, again, another husband, children. She started giving all these facts, and they went to India, and they were able to corroborate, yes, that family member had passed. And yes, all those things were true, and she did exist. And so, I mean, there are innumerable stories like this with a lot of detail. We're not giving you all the juicy details because, we got a lot of info to cover, but you can dig into this and find more information and see the corroborated details.
Ahoy, matey! Has your style ship sailed? Are you looking for direction? Point your sails toward High Level Design Salon and Barbershop in Pendleton, Indiana. Whether you're looking for a custom color or a swashbuckling fade, Zach and Jessica will help you find your treasure. For booking info, visit highlevel444.com. I wish you fair winds and following seas. Farewell, matey.
Well, I think a good talking point or question concerning children in this conversation is, think about it like a child isn't coming in trying to prove a metaphysical system.
Mm-hmm.
And, how do you not look at something like this and stories like this when a child is blurting out details before anyone has any time to coach them? Because of course there's going to be plenty of skeptics of this that are, oh, well, it's influence from the parents or this or that or whatever. But like, these kids didn't have time to be coached. That little girl, Dorothy, she hit her head and then all of a sudden she was okay. And then she started talking. Her parents didn't coach her to talk about any of that kind of stuff. And again, children don't have any, especially at that age, they don't have any kind of reason. They're not trying to prove or disprove any kind of metaphysical system. They don't have that kind of, they're not thinking about that. They're just recounting what to them is just like a memory, just the way I would remember what we did last week. To them, it's just as simple as that. So,
yeah. So this wasn't just people sitting around saying, "Ooh, that's spooky." Stevenson's method was more like, what did the child say? When did they say it? Who heard it? What can be checked? And what odd behavioral patterns came with it? Like we talked about earlier, fear of water after claiming a drowning death.
Yep.
Or, violent play around the manner of death, birthmarks allegedly lining up with documented wounds. And
we've always thought our daughter Layla might have died in like a car wreck or something in a previous life because she used to have a recurring dream when she was younger that she was in a car accident, and so she actually got car sick a lot too. She used to get car sick a lot. She doesn't really have it as bad anymore, but I feel like she grew out of it a little bit, but we always kind of thought maybe she...
And then she also has an odd birthmark around her neck, and we sometimes are like, oh, maybe you were hung in a past life or something like that. That's so morbid, but it's just kind of one of those things. It does make you ponder.
Right. So we want to keep a skeptical balance, though.
Mhm.
So, like we already said, obviously memory contamination is possible. You could have implanted memories from certain different things, and whether it be your parents, things like that, but parental influence is possible. Records are not always perfect. And also take into consideration, depending on where this child or this person is at, some cultures are more open to reincarnation claims than others, which also may affect the reporting. So I'm assuming that girl, Devi, Shanti Devi, is that her name? Yeah. She lived in India. That's obviously a core tenet of Hinduism is reincarnation, and Jainism and Buddhism. Like, it's a core tenet. So I'm sure that probably does affect the reporting. But if you dive into her story, you'll see that it's not just because of her surrounding and her environment and everything. Her story was very interesting, and it was definitely one of the ones that they corroborated information. She had the name of who her husband was. She knew the name of the town, which was roughly 150 kilometers away from where she lived in this life, and knew things about that. So that's why I don't think, you want to be skeptical because all of those things I just listed off are possible. But these stories we're telling you, these are some of the ones where it's like, these are out the window. I don't think you can disprove that. So,
Speaking of remembering these children's, I did a past life regression, which is a hypnotic technique used to explore past lives. A lot of people use it to resolve current emotional or physical issues. And that often helps identify root causes of phobias, behaviors, traumas. And a regression involves deep relaxation, guided visualization to recall memories. And from my experience, it is like recalling a memory from last week as they guide you in. We're not focused on ever thinking about a past life memory. A lot of people don't even believe that's a thing, as we've discussed. So why would you even consider going in? But when you do with the intention, it's in the subconscious mind, and trauma memories are stored in our DNA.
mm-hmm.
So practitioners use hypnosis to guide individuals from their current life into a previous existence, often with visualizations like a tunnel, door, or light. She had me floating on a cloud.
Ooh.
Yeah, it was nice. And
Cloud kicker.
Yeah. So you move from your conscious mind to subconscious state, similar to REM sleep, and you are able to access repressed memories or information. So a lot of these, there's been people that during a past life regression recall, again, they recall information from another lifetime that then is able to be corroborated through factual findings. And so my experience, the first memory that I had, she said, look at your feet. Because I've just felt like I was floating, and I was just a being. And she's like, look at your feet. And I look at my feet, and they're man feet. And I'm like, I'm a man. And I realized that I was a shepherd.
Do you have a shepherd's crook?
I did have a staff. but I like walking sticks. So I always find
that's why you love walking sticks now.
So I ended up, which that's not even what shepherd staffs are used for, but it just came to my mind. So at first it was a empty city, like a set. And I saw this, it started coming to life. There was this man that looked like a blacksmith. And I said, there's this man that looks like a blacksmith. She said, go talk to him. And I did. He was trying to tell me that I felt like I was lost. My people weren't around. He said, you have to go meet in the cave. she asked me, do you know where the cave is? I said, yes. And I went to the cave, and there were people there that were excited to see me.
Wonder if it was the caves in Qumran where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls.
Maybe. I had the feeling that I was
in that
a
era.
follower of Jesus,
Yeah.
and not necessarily walking with Jesus, but maybe an early Essene that subscribed to the early teachings of Jesus that had to hide. And that's why we were in a cave having our church. And then she said, go to another important day in that life. And all of a sudden I was on the ground surrounded by soldiers, and they speared me in the heart. And then she said, okay, you don't feel anything. We released that trauma. And she took me to another day. So then I noticed that I was a priestess, not any special, fancy, well-known priestess, but I was an Egyptian priestess in a temple. She said, is there anything in your hands? And I said, yes. I was holding a jar, an empty jar. And I had noticed that there was water surrounding the temple, like a moat. And I said, it's healing waters.
Was this inside the temple
This
or
was
outside?
inside the temple.
That was
there
normal. That was normal back then, to have like a flowing body of water inside the temple because there was water under them.
Well,
just like the pyramids.
I saw
an
it very
aquifer.
clearly.
Yeah.
Yes. So she said, is there anything in the jar? I said, no, it's empty. And I saw myself go over to the river. I said, I'm filling up. They're healing waters. She said, are they for you or for someone else? I said, both. I was going to be leading people and utilizing it for other people. Then all of a sudden, in my real present life, my body, I broke out in an intense sweat. My whole body was sweating. It was hot, very uncomfortably hot. And I'm not talking, it wasn't a hot flash. Okay. I'm not quite there yet, but it felt like that, like an instantaneous heat. And I became anxious, and I started kind of breathing heavy. And I said, can I just get up for a minute? Am I going to mess anything up if I get up and go to the bathroom? She said, no. So I go, I come back. I'm still in it. And all of a sudden, I saw people coming to attack the temple. I saw them from outside. I knew they were coming. And then they entered, they were destroying things. They were harming women. I was harmed. She says, okay, go to another important day in the life. And I kind of fast forward to my death. And my death was not related to being attacked. It was showing that I had made it through that, continued to live. And I was basically dying peacefully. I was on a bed, but it was like a concrete stone slab bed. I was surrounded by trinkets and flowers and jars. And I wasn't gone yet. I was very close to death, and I was crossing to the other side, and I was peaceful, and I was alone. There was no one there, but I think they were like nearby. And that was very interesting. I asked her later, did that seem fairly normal for what you experience with most people? And she said, no, actually, I could see your memories, and I felt like I was there with you.
Interesting.
Yeah. And she saw everything that I was describing. So I thought that was very, very interesting as well. But, that can just help you. It gives you kind of a sense. And it's interesting that in both lifetimes that I saw, they were spiritually minded.
Yeah.
And that's a very driving part of my life. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. And I've always, since youth, been attracted to spiritual things. And I think that it makes sense to me that both of those would have, a spiritual layer to them.
Mm-hmm. I wonder if I was a bard in another life.
Maybe.
Like in The Witcher.
Yeah, like a musician.
Musician.
And I want you to do a past life regression. I think that would be cool. And I know that you have also a sense of skepticism surrounding that. And it would be very interesting to see what your subconscious opens up to.
I mean, I'm open to it.
Yeah,
I would be interested.
we'll do that
I'm
sometime.
interested to see what they'd have to say, or what I would have to say, I guess.
And then there was the time that you got the reading, the Akashic Records,
Mhm.
which the Akashic Records is like the book of life.
Right.
And you can pull things out from that. And the reader was a gentleman, and he said, I was with you. He said that you had been part of a group that burned me at the stake at a point, and you were here to make kind of reparations in this life, but also to learn complete unconditional love.
Yeah.
You remember that?
I do remember that. That was a while ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was quite a while ago.
Several
but I do
years
remember
ago.
that.
We weren't married yet, so it was, I don't think,
Oh, no, I don't. Was it that long ago?
I don't know.
Wow.
So let's talk about why maybe the early Christians subscribed to this
Yes, this is documented.
and why it's no longer, now it's a heretical idea.
Heresy. So Christianity, this was part of one of the core tenets of Jesus's teachings, and by extension, Christianity, for the first, 500 years? For the first 500 years of Christianity. So we'll take it back a little bit and show that the Encyclopedia Britannica says that Origen, which, by the way, Origen was the early church father / historian. He was described as the greatest genius the early church ever produced. He was he was born in 185 CE. He died in 253 CE. So he was born just shy of 200 years after Jesus was around. So he is a highly respected early Christian scholar and theologian who spent most of his career in Alexandria. So Britannica says that Origen believed in the pre-existence of souls, but not in transmigration in the classic reincarnation sense. Over time, ideas tied to pre-existence became unacceptable in mainstream Christianity. The historical story is more complex than a simple someone deleted reincarnation verses, but it is fair to say Orthodox boundaries narrowed quite a bit around what could be believed about the soul. And quickly, I will just list off the other religions that also believe this. So you've got Hinduism, Sikhism, Jainism, Buddhism, certain sects of Judaism like the Hasidic Jews and the Kabbalists, a lot of Native American groups and tribes, the Aboriginal Australians, Rastafarianism, and Rosicrucianism. These are all major groups that reincarnation is, or at the very least, belief in life outside of this, the physical realm. These are core tenets of these major groups. So just a fun fact there. But you've got a few things, some good pearls.
Yeah, this comes from the Return of the Divine Sophia
Which
by
we've
Tricia
referenced
McCannon. Yeah, we've
in
referenced
a
before.
lot of episodes.
And she speaks about the banishment of reincarnation from church teachings. Erasing reincarnation from Christian theology began with the splitting of the Orthodox Church into two major divisions. So you had the Western Church, which was run by the Roman Emperor and the Pope in Rome, while the Eastern Church was run by the Emperor in Constantinople. That's a difficult word for me to say, and I said it. But anyway, so that's modern day Istanbul. Each of these emperors had the power to dictate church policy as they pleased, and they came together about once every 100 years in a council to review and determine church doctrine. So they were like, okay, let's see how this is playing out and what our agendas for the day, our politics for the day. Do we need to change anything? And in the 6th century, the Emperor Justinian, who ruled Rome, he ruled Rome from 527 to 565 CE. He decided that he wanted to remove reincarnation from church theology, but the Roman bishops opposed it. And Justinian, who was the most aggressive Roman emperor since Constantine in terms of meddling with theological doctrine, he tried to forcibly compel this change. And he imprisoned the Western Pope for 4 years, but eventually Pope Vigilus escaped. In retaliation, Justinian convened the 5th Ecumenical Church Council held in Constantinople at the Hagia Sophia Church in 553 CE. His intention was to force the church to adopt new policies, and he appointed his own bishops and issued edicts telling them how to vote. And got all these people together, had like 15 separate policies that were in direct opposition to Jesus' original teachings. And he declared that anyone who did not obey his edicts would be excommunicated. So the first edict read, if anyone asserts the fabulous preexistence of souls and shall assert the monstrous restoration which follows from it, let him be anathema. So anathema means damned. So let him be damned, while the word restoration refers to the spiritual restoration of the soul to its original union with God through reincarnation, a teaching of union that lay at the heart of Jesus' message. So he ignored everybody trying to keep it in there and said so his damage was done. And today, many Christians don't even realize that reincarnation was ever a part of Christian theology, and the teachings of Jesus became corrupted and hidden by men of no true mastery, just people that were in charge, that wanted control and power. And what these things said gave a little bit too much liberty. And I mean, the true path of enlightenment that Jesus taught was forced to go underground. You've got, modern day looks into that, which we can get a little bit more into. But so there's a Gnostic Christian, Tao Malachi, and he writes, you do not live one life, but many lives. Your soul passes from one life to the next until it fulfills its divine destiny. You have not come into the world for the sake of the world, but for the development and evolution of your soul. The challenge in entering into the world is to remember why you have come and to remain undistracted so that you might accomplish the purpose for which you have come. The world is a darkness wrapped in glittering lights, and the power of ignorance and forgetfulness is strong in it. But the true light is within you, and it is the extension of this light you must seek in the world, and so resurrect yourself in the world. And so, just a little tidbit also, that the concept of karma, which is closely linked to reincarnation, Jesus said, as ye do unto others, so shall it be done to you. As ye give, so shall it be given unto you. As ye judge others, so shall you be judged. As ye serve others, so shall you be served. That's Matthew 7:1. And this is the belief that what we will do comes back to us, that our actions have consequences. And imagine what a difference it would make if people truly know that when they cheat, they will be cheated on. When they kill, they will die by violence. When they are cruel, they will suffer.
Live by the sword, die by the sword. He also said that.
And Jesus expresses it again in the Gospel of the Holy 12, which is a Christian manuscript written in Aramaic, which was what Jesus spoke. And it was found that the Gospel of the Holy 12 was found in a Buddhist monastery in Tibet. And it said, it's Jesus' words that said, as ye do in this life to your fellow creatures, so will it be done to you in the life to come. Jesus also reminds us that he who lives by the sword dies by the sword. And you just quoted that, and it's Matthew 26:52. So in the Gospel of the Holy 12, we find also the original account of Jesus and Nicodemus shortly before Jesus' crucifixion. And most of us only know the edited version in the canonical Gospels. And once you read the full version, I'm going to read a little bit of it to you. It makes much more sense than deleted passages that were then like just put in. And so Nicodemus is asking Jesus how a man might be born again. And a certain rabbi, Nicodemus, came unto him by night for fear of the Jews, and said unto him, How can a man be born again when he is old? Can he enter a second time into his mother's womb and be born? Jesus answered, Verily I say unto you, except a man be born again of flesh and of spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. The wind bloweth where it listeth, and he heareth the sound thereof, but cannot tell whence it cometh or whither it goeth. The light shines from the east unto the west. Out of the darkness the sun rises and goeth down into darkness again. So it is with man from the ages unto the ages. When he cometh from the darkness, it is that he hath lived before, and when he goeth down again into darkness, it is that he may rest for a little, and therefore thereafter again exist. As through many changes must ye be made perfect. And perfect means complete. As it is written in the book of Job, I am a wanderer, changing place after place and house after house, until I come unto the city and the mansion which are eternal. And Nicodemus said unto him, How can these things be? And Jesus answered him and said unto him, Art thou a teacher in Israel, and understandeth not these things? Verily we speak that which we do know, and bear witness to that which we have seen, and ye receive not our witness. If I have told you of earthly things, and ye believe not, how shall you believe if I tell you of heavenly things? No man that ascends into heaven, but he that descended out of heaven, even the son, daughter of man, which is in heaven. That's the Holy 12:37, 4-10. And I mean, that's just kind of telling you, like, you come and you go, and then you return to the divine, the union with the divine. And until that, you will continue to come and evolve, and how you dished it out, you're probably going to get back. And it's not necessarily a punishment. It's just the lessons.
Yeah, if you haven't learned it, it's going to keep happening until you learn it.
So at the Second Council of Constantinople, that's when they really started taking this stuff out. And they were like, this seems like we're going to take out these teachings, their heresy, anything tied to the soul's pre-existence. And why do you think that matters? Why do you think they would care?
Control. If you remove reincarnation from the canon, you create one life, one judgment, one shot to get it all done.
One shot to get it right.
Which is much easier to control doctrinally. So if people know that they've got chance after chance after chance, that's going to affect the way that they move through life, especially in regards to church, in regards to the church hierarchy. Because, I mean, let's be honest, Christianity, really religion in general, but Christianity became something that Jesus was not trying to do. Jesus wasn't trying to start a religion. Jesus wasn't trying to...
No, he was... He literally said to free the captives.
Exactly. And to fulfill the law. And what happened after he got here? More law was added, to everything. And now you have modern day, you've got all these middlemen. And there's nothing wrong with pastors or preachers or anything like that. But you've got middlemen. You have priests and fathers and the Pope, which, they consider him the direct vicar of Christ, is the Pope. And that he is the end-all be-all for humans of the connection between God and us, and I don't think any of that was ever meant to happen, really, when especially when you're talking about Jesus. So speaking of Jesus, to add to what you just said about the story about Nicodemus, in the canonical Bible, which canonical just means the stuff that's in the Bible that you guys all have, or that if you have a Bible, this is in the Bible. So in Matthew, in multiple different places, in Matthew 11:14, Jesus says that John the Baptist is Elijah who was to come. He specifically says that. And then in Matthew 16:14, people ask if Jesus himself is Elijah, Jeremiah, or another prophet returned. They specifically ask him that. And we've gone into this in our Bible episode. But if you notice, Jesus does not correct them when they ask him that.
Yeah, he doesn't say, oh, what are you talking
Like,
about? You
yeah.
only have one life. How could you even? No, he says Elijah's come.
That John the Baptist, and also the fact that he's admitting John the Baptist is Elijah. Elijah was a prophet from the Old Testament. And he straight up says, yeah, John the Baptist is Elijah.
Well, what does the scripture say?
So we've got Matthew 11, for all the prophets and the law prophesied until John, and if you are willing to accept it, he is Elijah who is to come. And then you got Matthew 17 that said, why then do the disciples asked Jesus, why then do the teachers of the law say that Elijah must come first? Jesus replied, to be sure, Elijah comes and will restore all things. But I tell you, Elijah has already come. Then the disciples understood that he was talking about John the Baptist. Similar to Matthew, Jesus says Elijah has already come and suffered, referring to John. So that was in Mark. And then if you remember, we previously talked about how they specifically, because a lot of people point to this as like, oh, well, that means he wasn't. In John, they asked him, are you Elijah? And he said, I am not. Which makes sense. That does not disprove. John said, I am not. Well, that's because you don't remember what we talked about earlier. So it actually makes sense that he wouldn't remember that. So of course he's going to say, I am not. So those are some of the bigger ones that explain that. And like I said, Matthew says it a lot, but it at least shows that people at the time entertained the idea that a prophet could return. It was part of, and again, Jesus did not correct them.
And then there was also when the apostles asked after Jesus healed the blind man, and they said, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? And Jesus answered, neither this man nor his parents sinned, but that the works of God should be revealed in him.
John 9 is where you got that
John
from.
9.
Yeah.
And that's showing that reincarnation, or at least returning souls,
was an accepted part of their culture.
They understood
a
concept
understood.
they understood.
Because how can somebody sin before they're born? Unless there was another life that you could sin in. And yeah, so those are perfect examples of canonical Bible verses that don't say right out that reincarnation is real, but it's the conversation and the context clearly shows that at the very least, it was an accepted part of society back then, including with Jesus.
And I mean, the pre-existence of souls, whether or not, you believe it comes back, I guess, but
there is a difference there too. Pre-existence of souls is different than reincarnation. Pre-existence of souls just says,
or maybe you're just a little light being floating up there,
and then you decided to come down here, and here's your one life. So,
but I mean, there's just too many other factors that play. And then when you do look at the teachings of Jesus, the gospels that were removed from the Bible that all speak on this, and it stands to reason that an institution would prefer one life and one judgment and one eternity over, hey, we're not in this life thinking, oh, I'll get it right next time. I'm just going to, the goal is to evolve and become, union with God, with the one infinite creator, the light, and love. God is love. And that's scriptural.
yes.
And when you have one of those, one chance to get it right, it's a lot easier to control if one is caring about that in this lifetime, a spiritual person that's, wanting, or back then when they were messing with all this stuff and they were trying to control the population and the people, it's like, get rid of that. That gives a little too much freedom, and we're going to streamline it. You've got one chance. You better get it right, because if you don't, you're going to go to the bad place, and you only get one chance. And one thing that I brought up the book about the near-death experiences, one thing that a few people experienced, they actually did experience darkness at first, and they're like falling, and they call out to God. And even after death, they called out to God or to the light, and they are like pulled up into the light. And that's another, it's not to say act however you want and you're going to be just fine, because then there is the, as you do unto others, it'll be done to you. So, okay, well.
So we've got a fascinating pile of material here: philosophy, mysticism, children's reports, church controversy. But what does any of it actually suggest? So is consciousness made by the brain, or is it filtered by it? We'll talk about that for a sec. The philosophical implications here.
Because if the brain creates consciousness and that's the whole story, reincarnation sounds impossible. But if the brain is more like a receiver or filter, then reincarnation stops sounding absurd and starts sounding like imaginable.
So the child memory research doesn't prove a full metaphysical theory, but it does challenge the assumption, at the very least, that memory and identity are always locked inside one lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
It's obvious that that's not true. I mean, what is surviving death? Personality, memory, trauma, tendencies, unfinished attachments. I've heard numerous things. Obviously, we've talked about how you probably don't remember the trauma specifically, but there are other things that, like, maybe
it will create patterns in the next lifetime until that can be healed.
Right. And I've read instances where personality survives death, that maybe you have a very similar personality to, even if you were like a different gender in your last life or something, but you still have kind of that same personality. I've heard
it's a collection.
Yeah.
Each lifetime is a collection of former lifetimes.
Mm-hmm. And then your tendencies, things that you do, your weird tendencies or phobias, those kinds of things. So there is certain amount of memory that comes through. And then that kind of connects to the DNA being genetic memory. And I also think, let's keep an open mind here, that sometimes some of these things that you might be feeling, or maybe memories that somebody has, phobias, whatever, I think sometimes it might be also you tapping into somebody else in your family line, because DNA carries memory.
Oh,
so
yeah,
it's
like
possible.
Generational trauma.
Right. So we're going to keep an open mind here too, and say that it's very possible that generational trauma, that somebody back, your grandma, your great grandma, your whoever back in the line of your family, that something happened to them, and then that has been carried down.
Because as we said earlier, it's stored in the DNA.
Stored in the DNA. So you could have memories. So it's possible there's a memory you have, or a whatever, and that actually links back to somebody else in your family, which kind of goes along with the whole idea of when you hear somebody say, oh yeah, alcoholism runs in the family. My dad was an alcoholic. His dad was an alcoholic. His dad was an alcoholic. That I also think that you have a
tie,
genetic predispositions because of things that happened within your family line. So that's just something else to think about when it comes to all of this stuff. I'm not saying that's what all this is, but I think that's very possible when people have experiences like this or
And
feelings.
it is possible to heal generational trauma
Yeah, you could be the
and
stopping
break the
point.
loop.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Break
Yes.
the loop. So, okay, we've talked about repeating, like, have you ever experienced, a repeating relationship pattern or an unexplained fear or deep resonance with certain places or cultures? Maybe you go visit somewhere and you just feel like a resonance with that culture. What?
That's what I feel about. I swear, I think I was like, I either lived in Mexico or I was an Aztec or something like that, man, because I have always had a fascination with that entire culture. I love everything about really just Latin culture in general. I'm not going to necessarily just say Mexican culture, but Latin culture in general. I love everything about it. I love the people. I love the food. I love the music. I love just the environment, the vibrant colors, just all of it. And so I just had this conversation with Cash in the car the other day. I'm like, man, I swear I had some, I think it was last night actually. I had some Latino dance song came on, and I was like, golly, I'm like, I love this. I'm like, I swear I lived in Mexico or somewhere in South America in a past life. I'm still convinced of that.
So you can also have instant familiarity with people.
That's happened numerous times, I feel like, in a lot of people's lives.
I tend to believe that we kind of travel in soul groups. So
Soul tribes.
People that have been in another lifetime with you, maybe they're not maybe your best friend was your mom in another life or your sister. And you kind of tend to travel and have some of the same, you play different roles. I always find that very interesting. And I mean, Zach and I, we talk about this, I think, in our episode 0 that we talk about ourselves, but we had so many before we even met, and then later meeting and finding out all these different things that we were basically orbiting each other's lives, even before he was born, because we're 7 years apart. Like, I was watching his mom on a vacation Bible school type show as a puppet for Captain Hook. And she also sang on there. And Captain Hook came to our church a few times and she worked with him. And that was before you were even born.
Yeah. She was doing that before I was born.
Like, I had, and then, there's quite a few that, like, he went to school with who would be my step siblings in the future. And his first girlfriend was the sister of one of my best friends as a teen. And your first girlfriend, no, not first girl, your high school girlfriend was the daughter of my dad's best friend, which we found out. And there are so many weird little things like that it was just like we were orbiting each other's.
Your uncle was at my mom's wedding, all that. Your church used to use my church's baptismal, like the list goes on.
And on.
And on.
And so that's always a very interesting, soulmates.
Mm-hmm. And you can be, like she said, you're not always going to be like she wasn't. But we both truly believe that we are, part of each other's soul group, soul tribe, that we've been in many other lives together. But you're not always going to be like, she's the wife, she's the wife and I'm the husband in this life.
No, I definitely think that we've probably had other lifetimes where you're the wife and I'm the husband.
Yeah, and it could be other relationships
and other
too.
Relationships,
it could be
like
a mother and a son. It could be a mother and a daughter. It could be any number of relationships like that. It's not always going to be romantic. It's not always going to be, and you might not be the same gender in every life either. And we've been told that before when we've done like like the astrology, like the birth chart readings and stuff like that. We've been told before that, like, it was flipped at one point or, whatever. So it's not always going to be what it is in this current life either, which just makes it that much more interesting for your soul. It's that much more experience. Because, like, imagine if you came back as the same gender in every life. You're only
Boring.
going to learn half of what there is to learn.
And part of it is merging and integrating all those aspects of you, the
Correct.
feminine and the masculine
Correct.
energies that we all encompass.
So those are really good ways, or I guess things to look at to see, like, if you've ever felt like you knew somebody, or weird repeating relationship patterns. That's another one too, that, like, relationship patterns or things that you've noticed, like, you've had to deal with. Maybe that's because of it's something that was unfinished from a previous life, or something you didn't learn, or something you just still haven't learned yet in this life.
Joe Dispenza talks about it when he was doing a deep meditation and he had a past life memory that he was a philosopher, and he was speaking about the soul and remembering, and he was killed. And then basically came back as Dr. Joey D to continue that work, because that's what he does, is letting people know that they have the power to heal themselves through the divine intelligence. And he was like, this is a continuation of my work. And a lot of times we often have gifts that we might be afraid of because we were possibly punished in another lifetime for it. And then we come forward in this life, and until we shed that, you can't fully step into, part of the calling, part of the role, or the story that you came to play. And, maybe the point of this conversation isn't to prove you had a past life, but maybe it's to ask what keeps trying to be healed, remembered, or completed through this one.
That's good. Reincarnation may never be the kind of thing you can pin down with a neat little bow, but it keeps showing up in ancient philosophy, in mystical traditions, in theological controversy, and in child case reports that are strange enough to keep intelligent people looking. Maybe it's literal, maybe it's symbolic, maybe what returns is not a fully packaged personality, but a pattern, a wound, a lesson, a thread of consciousness still moving.
Even if part of this is true, then your life matters more than you think. Your choices matter more than you think, and your healing may be bigger than just this moment, this body, this chapter. So maybe the deepest question isn't, have I lived before? Maybe it's, what is my soul trying to learn now? And if you have any interest in what your soul has to learn now, and you would like a past life regression, you can hit up Jennifer. Her phone number is 317-760-9310. Again, that number is 317-760-9310. She works out of Moon Shadows Next Gen. That's in Greenfield. She's lovely. I had a great experience with her. And as always, this episode has been brought to you by High Level Design Salon and Barbershop. If you have any queries on booking with us, you can check out highlevel444.com, where you will also find the High Level Hairesy podcast tab as information. We also now have the High Level recommendations page, which has links to most of the books we've mentioned. I mentioned today Jonathan Livingston Seagull and how that helped Reincarnation click for me. That book is listed on there through Amazon. And all of those links, we get a small little cut that has a commission that has, it's no extra charge to you, just helps us keep putting the words out. But Return of the Divine Sophia, The Lost Teachings of Isis, Mary Magdalene, and Jesus, that book is also listed on there. And we also have a t-shirt shop available that has, so you can wear the message. Things like, karma's only a bitch if you are.
I love that one. Glenda.
So, yeah, Glenda, she's saying. And
We also
anything?
have, well, it's not only books, but also tools and things like that.
Yeah.
So especially for our clients and everything, but there's products, hair products, all that kind of stuff that we recommend use and on ourselves as well as our clients and recommend to them. Anything that you read on there, even the books, these are all things that we've actually used ourselves and that we believe in. We don't get we're not sponsored by any of these companies or these authors or anything like that. We are doing this because we truly believe in these products and or love these books. So if you are also thinking about starting a podcast yourself and you're wondering what gear you need, we've also got recommendations of all of the gear that you're listening to this on, our mics, our headphones, all that kind of stuff. So go check that out. Again, that's highlevel444.com for all that information, as well as how to book with us in our contact info.
And if you have ever had a past life memory or a regression, anything like that, and you'd like to share it, we'd love to hear about it. You can shoot us an email. That email is also listed, Zach and Jess at highlevel444.com. Thank you so much for listening. If this struck a chord with you, like, share, subscribe means a lot to us, and just your support means a lot just to help raise the consciousness of the planet. And we love you.
Thanks again. Until next time.
We leave you in the love and the light of the one infinite Creator.
May the force be with you.
And also with you.
High Level Hairesy.